Hello, good morning, and happy Sunday Sunday. Thanks for joining us in the studio today. How are you all? We are a little bit tired. Our spirits are a little bit tired, and that's what we want to talk about today. Sometimes it just seems like there's a lot that the world asks of us. We have to be productive, we have to be available, we have to be resilient, we have to be positive. We have to know what's going on in the world. And all of these demands are on us, even when we're sad, when we're carrying grief, when we're feeling uncertain, when we're feeling disappointed, when we're tired. So that's what we want to talk about. What happens when our spirit feels tired and depleted? How do we continue showing up for all these demands on our lives without completely losing ourselves? So that's what we want to dive into today. What is emotional and spiritual fatigue? Sabby, do you want to get us started?
Sure. Well, to me, it's just a draining of the soul. It's like not being able to move forward with anything. And when I thought about this week, I actually was just met with an obstacle, a couple of obstacles actually. And I realized I was like, what the heck? Like, how do you move when you're tired? I've always been the backbone, or that you would say, or the go-to person for situations. And so in that moment, I was like, how do I continue to fight? And I'm so tired. The energy level on the inside, it's not a physical tired, it's on the inside. And so how do you see past that? How do you continue to move past that when you're like when you're spiritually tired? That causes you to be physically tired. They all come together, and how do you move past that? So when I thought about that this week, that's where I was. I had met obstacles, and I was like, you know what? I'm fatigued right now. I don't know how to see past this. I don't know how to see myself moving.
I just wondered, how did you push through? We've all heard that saying that you can't pour from an empty cup, right?
Mhm.
So how do you find strength when you're feeling empty? Like, was there something that you did, or are you struggling with that feeling right now?
For me, no, it was over. It's not over, but it's just sitting there. I immediately thought of a go-to scripture, and I just started praying in the car. I was really just frustrated. Like, I'm tired of being hit below the belt. I feel like I'm just
Mm.
constantly being knocked down. And so I thought of this scripture where it says, "Cast all your cares on him, for he cares for the world." And I was like, I'm about to throw all this stuff on your plate and not look back.
That's right. So that's where you turn when you're
Mhm,
feeling empty. You turn
mhm.
to prayer, spirituality, God. What about
And my
anybody else?
friends, and my
And your
friends.
friends. I think that's important
Yes.
too, because I do think when we're struggling, there are certain things that can help restore your spirit. And I do think that practice, rituals, prayer, activity, sometimes just changing your physical presence when you're struggling can help you get unstuck. And I do think that friendship is a really important part of that, because sometimes you just need somebody else to remind you of
Mhm.
who you are and where you are and how far you've come. So I'm glad you said that.
And friends are tangible. I have to say that, like, with prayer, there's a faith thing, or with any kind of meditation or whatnot, that comes from like belief within. You have to believe that for yourself. But when you have people around you and friends and, you know, church and whatnot, those are tangible things that you can actually, like, they can hug you. They can, put their arms around you. They can cry with you. Those things, so that's a very important part of that. It's very important to call on your friends or family if you have.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I went to a women's breakfast yesterday and they were talking about how to uplift other women. So the church here that I go to, they have a women's breakfast the first Saturday of every month. And I really thought it was a great topic. So you sit at a table, and every time I go, I sit at a table with different women. So I never know who I'm sitting with. And I was talking about you ladies, and I said, I think it's very important to have a really strong group of women who are like minded. Like we all have different opinions. Maybe it's politically or how we raise our children or whatever the case may be, you know, but there is this, we're not out doing things that you would consider that could put damage your soul, right? Bad associations spoil useful habits. I think I may have mentioned this to you like probably about 20 years ago. I was hanging out this woman and we were going to a club and she was getting dressed specifically to hook up with a guy and she's married. And I don't have to worry about with any of that stuff with this circle. You know, you guys are very much very centered. And so it's nice to be able to go to centered people who are kind of, like-minded. And so I appreciate you guys being a sounding board, especially, last year was very difficult for me when I was going through the divorce. You all picked up, you all answered your phone. And I was fatigued in so many ways at that time. And I still feel like I am a little bit, but not so much in relation to that separation, just in what's next. But, like Savvy said, I just have to trust that everything's going to go as the way it's supposed to go. I believe that I was supposed to go on a certain path. I was supposed to be at a certain place. I was there. I showed up. And I don't think that journey is over with. There was a reason why I was sent where I was sent. And so, yeah, I'm just going to put it all on God and say, okay, guide me. Where are we going next? And actually, I'm really excited. It's actually a stress reliever to just be like, you take this.
Mhm.
Just you do it. You said you
I
got it. I trust that you got it.
I like that. I like how you
Yeah.
said, "Where are we going next?" Because that is like a huge part of trusting Christ, trusting that He's got this. Like, no matter where we are in our lives, He's got it. Like, He already knows what's going to happen, and He's going to guide us in one direction or another, but we get to choose. That's the beauty of free will. But where I get spiritually fatigued, and I'm not saying that like I'm always really good at listening to God and like doing what He is guiding me to do. No, that's a daily struggle. That's something that I have to choose every single day. I have to choose Him every single day, and that isn't always my pattern. That isn't always my routine, and that's tricky. But where I get spiritually fatigued is, I'm just going to say it, politically, where the ways of the world and the way that we are going, and like mornings like today, like looking up at the sky and seeing how gloomy it is. And it's like, is this from God? Or is like, I don't know, maybe I'm going off a little bit too much here, but like, is this from God or is this something that the government is working on? Like even just illness and just in general, the way the world is going. And I just have to keep reminding myself, like, I can only control myself. I can only have faith for me and talk about what is true and what is beautiful and what is holy and what I can do, like getting up and going to mass and getting up and praying here in my prayer room and doing what I can with my family, with my husband, and living like a sound, prayerful life that surrenders to Christ. And, but yeah, that's definitely where my spiritual fatigue comes in is the
Mm.
worry of where we're going and like worry of, like, I want my grandkids to know what real milk tastes like. Like, I don't want my kids to only know processed foods. I don't want them to only know like meats that are manufactured in,
Printed.
yeah, in
Crazy.
like a warehouse. You know what I mean? I want them to know real God made goods that we were raised on. And it worries me that we're not going in that direction anymore.
I
I know that's way out there, but
No.
that's where my spiritual fatigue lies.
I can 100% relate to everything you all are saying here, and that is where I struggle too, because growing up as an American kid, we were, taught these ideas that we can make a difference in the world, and we have a constitution that matters, and it provides us inalienable rights where we have the right to pursue freedom and happiness and live out our dreams, in the world. And so I grew up, with those ideals and that mindset. And when things were wrong, feeling like I need to do something about this, like do my part, and I'm struggling right now because I feel like evil forces have infiltrated, and this isn't just, I'm not partisan, so, I'm not making this about any one party, one person, one group, but there are evil forces that have really infiltrated our social systems, our government systems, and are running things right now. And I'm not sure that that's anything new. I just think it's becoming visible in more ways that are so obvious now that it's, unavoidable to see. Like you talked about the sky, that's one thing I struggle with every day. It's like, that is not a real cloud up there, and you can call me crazy or whatever, but look into it. Geoengineering's real, and I really struggle with that because it's something that I didn't sign up for. I don't remember voting on that. I don't remember, saying it's okay to use my tax money for these things, for wars. I'm going to try not to go too far down the rabbit hole because you guys know I can.
Exactly.
But I'm really struggling with that, daily because I watch, my children trying to navigate the world as young people, and they have, just bright eyes and are so, have so much to offer the world and are so excited about their lives. And how do they navigate all of this without losing their spirits, and becoming really salty, about things.
Mm.
And
Mm.
it's such a hard thing to navigate. I really like what you said, Savvy, about just turning to faith and to God and to all of you. I think all of you just spoke about this. So, I think that that's really where my head has been at lately too. And because I think maybe that's all of it, is what we're supposed to be doing, that
Mhm.
maybe we're not in control of a lot of it, and the more we can turn that way and just focus at home, what would it be like if everybody did that? But I do have to say though, there is a part of me that struggles in that area. I can't just turn a blind eye to what's right in front of my face. And I can't believe that God wouldn't want me to do my part about that, and just, well, that's the way it is. And there's always going to be good and bad. And how do you balance that? I really don't know. That's
Mm.
where and I can get really depressed about it, because I see how it affects my family, how people are struggling financially, economically, a lot of different things, going to the grocery store and there's no food there. In the grocery store, we're supposed to buy food. There's no real food, and even the real
Mhm.
food that's there is modified, in ways. So I feel like just every aspect has been infiltrated, but maybe that's to help us bring us back to what is natural, what is true, what is of God,
Mm.
and to realize that and focus on that. So that's kind of what I've been thinking about lately is, well, maybe that's what I'm supposed to be doing right now is just changing my focus to what upsets me about all of that and just focusing on, okay, well, I'm going to go back to the natural and what I know is of God.
Yeah, he wants us to seek him. And maybe this is the way that he's doing that. He wants us to look for the good, the natural, the what was intended. Because the more we search, we will find him.
Did you guys watch the Star Wars movies?
Mhm.
Maybe some of you
Oh, I
did. Do you
love that you're going
remember
to talk about this.
the scene where Obi-Wan is talking about, you know, the Empire has fallen and he's talking to the Jedi and the world basically and saying, do not return to the temple. Just basically saying, we have fallen, the good has fallen. But he basically ends that whole speech with, but good will return. And I wish I could remember it verbatim, but maybe Carol, you're shaking your head. Maybe you remember. But essentially, he's just encouraging. He's the Jedi and everybody else out there. Like, don't lose faith. Don't lose hope.
I don't remember the line exactly either, but it's interesting that you bring it up because Aaron and I were just talking about that yesterday. And essentially, a lot of the Star Wars movies, there is the person that is the one that is sacrificing himself. There is the enemy. And then there is the empire. There is, heaven. And
Mhm.
essentially the premise of like all those movies is what I texted you guys the other day, like eyes to heaven, eyes to
Mhm.
heaven, because goodness will come back.
Prevail. Yeah.
Goodness will prevail. Like there is goodness in the world, no matter how bad things get. And we just have to believe and we have to fight that spiritual warfare
Mhm.
internally. We have to use our prayers. We have to believe that there are angels, that there are protectors, that there are guardians, and it's okay to turn to them. Like, we don't have to do this alone. We're not here alone. We are supposed to believe in the greater good and something bigger than ourselves. We're not alone.
I always remember, and I think I've shared this with you guys before, that in Buddhism there's a quote that says winter always turns to spring. So when I'm going through hard times, I remember that line. Scoopalicious, what did you want to share?
Actually, I have a question, talking about spiritual fatigue. So one other thing that was brought up at the women's breakfast was the woman was like, I went to church all the time. And she goes, but I didn't have a relationship with God. She's like, I can read my Bible, but I didn't process it. I don't have a relationship with God. And it got me thinking, what does a relationship with God look like? So I don't know if any of you guys can touch on that, because I really don't know. I've been baptized. I believe in God. I pray. I don't think I actually have a relationship. How do I get there? What does that look like? I don't know what that looks like. And I'm sure it's different for everybody. Maybe I do. I don't know. Any of you guys have any?
I think a relationship with God is just like a relationship with you and I. I think that's how we have to see that. As much as I want to spend time with you guys and hang out and party or just get together for a drink, he desires that same kind of like communion. And so I think that that's how I see my relationship with God, as someone that I seek to be with, also give my time to as well. And years prior, I will say it looked a little different. My prayer life has been lacking, and it's changed significantly. But I spent a lot of time in prayer. I spent a lot of time on my face. I spent a lot of time meditating and just appreciating the beauty that was before me, the canvas that was before me. And to me, that felt like a praise of my relationship with the Lord. Like that felt like admiration and gratefulness and just, love showered surrounding me from him just by seeing what I'm seeing. And so I feel like that would be my example of a relationship with him.
Thank you. It's a very good explanation. Making time. And I haven't been doing that. I haven't been making time. If I make time for you guys, why am I not making time for him? And when I feel this way, because, I kind of had a struggle this week with a family member, and I just decided to walk away, to be like, this is my boundary. I'm out. And I am putting it in God's hands, because I'm too exhausted with that situation. And I can't take it on anymore. It's I have I think I text you guys, like, I took a 4-hour nap yesterday, and then I slept fine last night. I think this emotional fatigue and this spiritual fatigue is definitely leading into the physical. My body hurts. Woke up yesterday thinking I was having a heart attack. Like, my chest hurt. And I was like, this does not feel good. And everything kind of just stacks on. It's not like you're feeling spiritual fatigue, you're feeling physical fatigue. It's just not, I feel like it's just not one thing. When I am tired, everything about me is tired. It's kind of hard to come back from that rest, because I could still use another nap today. We just woke up.
It absolutely affects the entire body. It literally attacks. Like it's like when how your brain controls everything. Like you can't move without without thinking about it or whatnot. It's like I think the spiritual has more energy behind it. It needs to push you to move and to do the things that you need to do. And when that is depleted, it then rolls into the other places in your life.
Absolutely. 100% agree.
I think we could spend more time talking about your initial question, Shannon, about how do you have a relationship with God or higher being, whatever word you want to use for God. I think that's a question that deserves a lot of attention, because I think it's probably at the root of this matter of how do you resolve spiritual fatigue? And I think it does have to start with that relationship. And I think that relationship, first of all, has to start with like an acceptance that we're not just random. I will go back to what we talked about several weeks ago, the chances of our existence. And I think we touched on it last week too, which is like
Mhm.
1 in a billion, trillion, jillion, zillion.
Mhm.
So, and Carolina said it, the fact that you exist, that Scoopalicious exists, is a miracle. So if you believe that, and you don't even have to believe it, it's the truth. I mean, you can ask Google, what is the probability of your existence?
Mhm.
So just the fact that you are here, doesn't that in itself point to something bigger than random chance that you just happen to be walking around this earth in this shape and in this form? So I think the relationship starts with the acceptance that you are a miracle, and
That
that
you are
miracle,
intended.
right? That you're supposed to be here. That God, in whatever form you want to acknowledge him or her, looked down on this world and said, I don't want this world without Shannon in it. I don't want this world without Lena in it. I don't want this world without Tanisha and Minu and Paula and Aaron in it. And that in itself is a miracle. So
And
I
it
think,
is good.
and it is good. Thank you. So I think that relationship starts with acknowledging the fact that you are of spirit, and then finding ways to commune with that spirit. Even if it's just in those first 30 seconds when you open your eyes in the morning and you're like, wow, I got to wake up today. Thank you.
Gratitude.
Gratitude.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then I think just being in community, communing with source, which I think, Aaron's talked about this a lot too, is that sometimes all you need to do is go outside, get some sunlight on your face, look around at all the miracles that are right in front of you.
Mm.
Even when we're struggling, even when we're hurting, just take a minute to look around and just notice the beauty, notice the silence, notice the little tiny miracles that are popping up everywhere. Even when we're down in the dumps, even when we're as low as we can be, I think there's always something to turn to, something to remind you, what a miracle it is that we are alive today. Savvy, I don't know if you know, but we don't see you, but I see that you have your hand up.
I know.
Are you doing something behind that camera?
You're funny.
Uh,
You go. I wanted to say, Paula, you said something that really hit me there. I realize that with the spiritual fatigue and whatnot, that causes for you to kind of not forget, but move out of practice of gratitude. And it kind of it begins to build something on the inside of you if you don't watch out, right?
mhm.
If you don't catch it in advance. Devil is crafty. And so I think that's where I began to get, negative kind of seeped in, and not being able to see those blessings anymore that I saw before. And I know that, and I think that's one of the things that I want to convey out there, or just say that, being in this place is not some place you have to stay, right? Like, even
Mhm.
being fatigued, you don't have to stay here. And
Choice.
so you experience a lot here, and we might talk about good things or doing these things, but I do want to touch on those that are at wits end, who feel like they can't see past the fatigue, can't see a bit of gratitude at all. You know what I'm saying? That you spoke to that and reminded me. And I wanted to say that was a beautiful thought, because it made me think about all of those things. I lived in Denver, and the apartments that we stayed, or the place that we stayed in, my apartment faced the trash. It faced the dump. And I had the most prettiest little space. Like, my space was on point. But when I sit out there, I see the trash. And so I had went to a wellness program. Mental health is a big thing for me. So I went to a wellness program, and I began to transform my thinking, and I no longer saw that trash can. And so gratitude and gratefulness and just being able to meditate and doing all those things, they open up for that fatigue to not be there. They open up
Mm-hmm.
for you to have that energy and see things differently. You're no longer desensitized to the negative and everything that's going on around you and make you feel like, that's all you see. We're bleeding that. And so I wanted to point that out, that it was an important point, that you have to keep that in the forefront of your mind. You got to continue to stay have gratitude and stay grateful. You can't ignore that. It's very important.
And I love what you said, Sammy, that it's a choice. Being stuck, staying stuck is a choice.
It
Erin, what
is.
did you want to share?
100%.
I think for me, when I am feeling out of sorts like that, practices really help me, getting back to, okay, I'm going to go pray right now. I'm going to call a friend and reach out, or I'm going to get outside and go walk, or each morning I'm going to start my day with gratitude before I let my feet hit the floor. I'm going to just take a few minutes and connect spiritually with God and think of the things that I'm grateful for morning and night, when I go to sleep. So I do think I think somebody said the word communion, and that is what it's about, the community, the union, the connectedness, and the practices help help me stay in that. And I can certainly relate to the struggle of staying in that. But like you said, I think the evil forces are crafty. I think that I stepped away from my spiritual practices and faith for a long time, not completely, but what filled my soul for a long time, because I was so angry about the sex abuse cover-ups and, what I perceived to be just like completely unacceptable, practices by the church and covering it up. And I realized for me that that's part of the plan of the evil forces, though, is, this is how I pull people away, because people do bad things all the time, everywhere, all the time. And people do good things all the time, everywhere, all the time. And what do you look for? And not allowing myself to be pulled away from my faith because of things like that. Like, that's something that has come full circle for me. And I've really realized that's what happened. And there's a lot of good that's come out of that too, that whole process. But I'm just glad that it's come to light now of like, oh, I didn't have to leave altogether,
Good. Well, you came back. That's
The
for the
practices
value.
are huge, like you said, Shannon, just making the time, I struggle with that too. We get busy, like life, you get pulled in a million directions. And for me, I've been really trying to focus on how do I help that time to stay like, this is sorry, but like whatever's going on, like I still need to make time for this. So
I think there's value in prioritizing yourself. That's not selfish. That is self-full, you could argue.
I'm gonna start looking at it like Savvy said. I think I'm gonna, I set dates with you guys. Why am I not setting a date with God? And I need to make my date. I need to make it a few times a week.
Yeah.
So thank you for your input on that. And maybe I think that'll also help with my fatigue as well, to just let go and let God.
Exactly. Yeah. I just was going to add that I do think that getting rid of spiritual fatigue or getting rid of like negativity and worry definitely comes from a place of having a relationship with the Lord. And that does come with, like you said, Shannon, dating, like making time for Him, making time for prayer, making time for, going outside and putting your bare feet in the dirt and knowing that you are perfectly made and that you are intended. You are intended for this life and for this world. And where you are, this nest that we have of friendship is beautiful and it is good. And it is intended for us to lean on each other, just like leaning on our faith, and there are practices in place that we need to turn to in moments of weakness, whether that is getting up for Mass every Sunday, going to adoration and sitting in silence. That is where I feel like my relationship grows with the Lord, is in the silence of my heart with Him. And that is what we are taught, in Catholicism is that sitting in silence, making time for prayer is sitting in silence with him, clearing your mind and listening to his word, whether we're reading scripture and then sitting in silence and reflecting on that scripture, or whether we're, sitting in our home and saying a rosary, or, calling on all the reinforcements in heaven for guidance in something specific in our lives. That is the saints. Those are the reinforcements in heaven, that are there for us to pray to and have them help us and guide us in whatever we might be going through. So yeah, that to me is growing your relationship with the Lord, is the silence and the surrender in him and for him.
I just wanted to add something that you said, Lena, that really helped me a little while ago when I get really spun up in fear and worry about what's going on in the world or around me, or, things that are really honestly out of my control. But I want to, I want to influence, I want to change, because it's hurtful and painful to watch what's happening. You said to me, that's not of God, the fear, the worry, and also those things that are happening. And it just hit me so squarely of like, you're right. Like all these things that I'm feeling right now are not of God. It's me needing to recognize that he wants us to be happy, he wants us to be loved, and remember that, sitting in all of that and allowing it to overrun everything that we're doing is not the plan,
Mhm.
So that was helpful to me, and everything that was just said too, very helpful.
I'm so glad. And it's so important for us to have these conversations, because sometimes we just need to be reminded. We just need to be reminded.
Yes, absolutely. Well, this was a good conversation, ladies. I think that we have to remember that strength isn't always about pushing through things. Sometimes we have to admit that we're tired. Sometimes we have to remember that our spirit needs a little bit of rest. And just because we need some rest doesn't mean we're quitting. We have to prepare for what's going to continue to come down the pipeline. I think everybody gave us a good reminder today that we have to remember who we are. Remember who you are. Remember where you come from. And honor that and trust. Trust that we will continue to be guided and guarded. Thank you for joining us on the Sunday Sundae podcast. We hope you have a really wonderful day, and make sure to rest if you need it. Thanks for joining us.